I'm going to do your introduction, as you always do. Okay, at this time it is 4:31. We do have quorum. We do have Sherry DeCeter present. We have Percy Dufour, and we also have Vice Chair Ray Beneteau. Chair Brian Gray is not in attendance at this time. However, he did state that he would be in attendance, but due to the time constraints, we are looking to start the meeting. So I will hand it over to Vice Chair Ray Beneteau. I do also want to note that at this time, we are experiencing technical difficulties. We are in the Zoom room at Town Hall, and unfortunately, the camera is not working. However, again, present with me is myself, Sarah Aubin, the Assistant Planner, Corinne Chason, Percy Dufour, and Ray Beneteau. So I am going to hand it over to the chair, Ray Beneteau.
Thank you. We're going to call the meeting to order, and we're going to start off with any conflicts of interest. If anybody has any, let it be known now. Seeing none. Okay. The published agenda.
Bear with me for just one moment. Is everyone able to hear that? Sherry, were you able to hear Ray?
It's a bit distant, but I'm struggling to hear, but I can hear.
Oh, okay. Ray, can you talk?
Yeah.
Is that better? Is that better, Sherry?
It's a bit echoey, like I hear you loud and clear. Is he sitting next to you by chance?
Can you talk in your mic?
We'll call the declare of interest. Is any conflict of interest? Can you hear me,
No.
Sarah?
Yeah, it's a bit better.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, we'll adopt the published agenda for the meeting.
Mr. Chair, I'm just going to jump in there for one moment. We do have two amendments that we need to make to the agenda. The first one being on the last application, which is for Draper Street, Mr. Alex Pateo. We do need to just make an amendment to that we put the wrong ward on that. So Draper Street is actually located in Colchester, and that is Ward 3. So I believe I might have put Ward 4. So that's the only amendment to that part of the agenda. And then Sarah Aubin also has an amendment to one other item. And that was at the very end of the agenda that states for the next meeting, which is?
That amendment will be that the meeting is on Wednesday, April 20th, and not originally noted April 19th. We are moving the meeting due to Easter, and the regular council meeting will actually be on April 19th. Therefore, we are moving it to Wednesday, April 20th. So just those two amendments noted. Just a motion to adopt as amended.
Okay.
Just one quick question. I don't know if I understood.
Put your thing in. Yep.
Corinne, I don't know if I understood properly, but did you say Ward 4 for the Draper Street application? That would be Ward 3?
That is correct. So it is B0622, and that's for the Draper application. Oops, sorry, 1 second. Sorry, B0622. And that is Colchester South, or sorry, Colchester, the village of Colchester. That is Ward 3.
Mm-hmm.
So I need a motion for that?
Yeah.
And a motion for that?
No, that's just a correction.
Just a correction?
Yeah.
No?
Yeah. So Sherry is adopting.
Okay, okay.
Okay. And then we need a seconder.
Can I get a second? Okay.
Hi, Mr. Chair. Okay. So Percy, I would just like to clarify that the last motion that was just on the floor was the adoption of the published agenda. There was 2 items that were amended. That was item 6.7 with regards to the Draper application from Colchester South and Ward 3, as well as item 11 with regards to future meetings, that it be April 20th, not April 19th, as noted. And it was moved by Sherry and seconded by Percy Dufour. I just want to ensure that all are in favor, correct? We do see that the chair is now with us. So welcome, Chair. At this time, we can turn the meeting over to you, as Vice Chair is stating that he would prefer that.
The Vice Chair can carry on at this point in time. That'd be fine. If he's been doing that, I hate to disrupt things at this point. Sorry, I'm late.
That's okay. Thank you so very much. I also want to let you know that we are having visual issues here in the Zoom room. So unfortunately, we do not have any video capabilities. So we will have to rely on the mics at this time to determine motions and comments.
Okay, thank you.
Brian, we haven't really got started, so you're here. You're more than welcome to it.
Oh, okay, Ray. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not getting any picture at all besides from your point of view, so I can't see what you're doing as far as motions and that goes. So we'll rely, I guess, on Corinne to get us through those events. Thank you. So welcome, everybody. I apologize for being late. I lost the link somewhere and had one hell of a time getting it back together. All right, so we'll go with we accepted the agenda. And are there any conflicts of interest?
There was no, Mr. Chair.
Great. So let's move on to the first one,
Minutes.
which is, I'm sorry?
Sorry, Chair, we do require the minutes to be adopted. We haven't done that motion as of yet. I apologize.
Yep, no problem. Motion to adopt the minutes from the previous meeting. Moved by Sherry.
And Mr. Beneteau. Seconded by Mr. Beneteau.
Great, all in favor? Thank you. All right, so is there any unfinished business? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next, and we'll hand it over to Corinne for her report on the first application.
And that is for the creation of a new residential lot. And the owners of the property are Mr. William and Mark Robertson, and their son Blair Robertson is actually with us today and joining us to speak on the application after we finish this presentation. So the property is 15403 County Road 8. That's in Colchester North. That's Ward 2. And the official plan designation for this property is rural residential. Zoning category for it is residential R1.3. And the total area of the subject lot, that's the green area and the purple area shown here on the left-hand side. Thank you, Sarah. That area comes up to 0.73 acres or 31,000 square feet. So the property size is 177.2 by 180 in feet. And the center portion is going to be 78 feet by 180 feet. The retained green area is 99.2 feet by 180 feet. The access to this property is County Road 8. West side of the property currently contains one single family dwelling and one accessory structure. East side of the property is vacant and mowed grass. The existing dwelling is in good habitable condition, has municipal water, and has a private septic system. Next slide, please. Okay, here's a look at the property. It's located in the little hamlet of Pocket Corners. Residential lots have been well established here for quite some time. Top picture, you can see the vacant grassed area and the Robertson's existing house and detached structure. Middle photo here, you can see the westerly neighbor and the frontage of the Robertson's home. The bottom photo you can see is the adjacent Chrysler Canada Greenway owned by the Essex Region Conservation Authority. Thank you. Next slide, please. In considering a consent application, we need to ensure that the proposal meets the policies, provincial policy statement, the official plan, and the zoning bylaw. When we reviewed this application, we did not find any conflicts with the provincial policy statement. This also meets the criteria for this section 1152C that states residential infill lots were appropriate, where appropriate, are permitted in rural designated lands. The official plan also states that property is designated residential, rural residential consents are permitted if the proposal meets section 6.5 of the consent policies. This proposal is comparable to adjacent lots and is characteristic with the immediate neighborhood and development pattern. The lot has adequate municipal services, that's potable water, storm drains, and both lots have adequate areas for private septic systems. This proposal meets all of the zoning bylaws except for one, that is dealing with the lot width. So the applicant is applying for a minor variance for that lot width only. Next slide, please. So here is that clip from the zoning bylaw that is asked for, they are asking for relief from. So it's a reduction of the minimum lot width provision for a residential R13 lot. And from the required 30 meters, and just so you know, the metric conversion, normally we look at 100 feet, but it's actually 30 meters converts to exactly 98.4 feet. So what we have is two lots that would result 78 feet for the severed portion, and then 99.2 feet for the retained. Next slide, please. So going through the minor variance, we just have to make sure that the four tests are satisfied. General intent of the OP and the zoning bylaw are maintained. Yes, the official plan does permit the creation of residential lots in that rural residential designation when in accordance with the provisions of the PPS, which it is. This proposal does satisfy that PPS criteria. Number two there states that is it minor and desirable for the appropriate use of land. As you know, lots do vary in the R1.3 district. They are historical lots of record. They are different sizes in several areas. In this area, though, this lot would be very comparable to some neighboring lots. And if you look at the bottom of the page there, you can see the lineup of houses that are existing there. And I did, you might not be able to read, but there is a couple there that are under the 98.4 feet in width. There's actually one that's 67 feet wide. So it would be in that comparable area. And then number three, the variance is compatible with the existing character of the neighborhood, traffic and parking patterns. This proposed new lot is of comparable size, like I just mentioned, and no traffic or parking concerns are anticipated as a result of this proposal. And lastly, number four, the variance deals with circumstances particular to the site and development. The variance is necessary to accommodate the relief, that relief for lot width only. And again, the magic number is 98.4, so this would bring it down to 78 feet. Next slide, please. So should the committee choose to approve these applications, approval should be subject to satisfying these following typical conditions that are on the screen here. And upon circulation of these applications, we did not receive any objections or comments from the internal departments. We did receive some comments from external agencies, which included IRCA and the County of Essex. County of Essex stated that you need to have appropriate setbacks from County Road 8, which can be readily addressed for at the layout stage for a house and septic system. And then IRCA also noted that the Chrysler Canada Greenway is next door. And anytime that you have a property development next door, they would like to be notified just to make sure that there's no setback concerns. They did not have any objections to the proposal of a severance. So at this point, I will turn it back over to you, Mr. Chair, For discussion, we do have Mr. Robinson and his son Blair joining us, if they wish to speak on this next. Thank you.
Thank you, Corinne. Mr. Robertson, would you have anything you'd like to add at this point in time?
Wait, go ahead.
No,
Hi.
just that we appreciate some consideration. My son does plan on building a house next door, and we would just like to, see that he can afford to get a home the way that the prices of houses are nowadays.
Yeah, for sure.
I also do want to give a thanks to Corinne and Sarah for everything they've done. Everything we've gone through, and I went through a couple drafts just because I'm new to this whole thing. I just want to say thanks to both of them for all of their help and professionalism, really.
Very nice. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yep. Any questions from anyone on the committee?
Mr. Chair, Ray Beneteau has a question.
Go ahead, Ray.
Is there nothing in, through you, Mr. Chairman, Corinne, like is not upset with anybody building that close to the greenway?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So the comments that we received from IRCA, they do highlight that, they are the adjacent neighbors. Do they have any issues with it? The fact that this property is being proposed at 77 feet, there will be, they have to go through the building process. They'll have to make sure that they satisfy the setbacks for the zoning bylaws. The IRCA property is much higher, so we don't anticipate any drainage concerns or any other issues.
Higher?
IRCA is higher because it's actually the old abandoned railway line is elevated. And then also the distance back, they will be able to, like I said, satisfy those setbacks, and they didn't express any other issues. One of the issues that IRCA usually typically has concerns about is if there is intensified development next to the greenway. They just don't want to see a lot of access points, people putting in their own accesses from like a rear of a property, for instance, onto the greenway. They do want established agreements for those types of things. So they did not express any concerns with this one or any concerns with the access, but we always do refer the applicants to talk to IRCA if they are doing anything adjacent to.
But how can you not anticipate any drainage issues when they're higher than what this lot is? Like their water's gonna go somewhere and he's gonna end up with it.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, the IRCA lands, they do have a swale, okay, on their own lands, so that any water coming off of the greenway itself will go into that swale and then be directed out towards the roadway or further along their drainage corridor, which is a private drainage corridor.
Okay, and you, through you again, Mr. Chair, but
Yes.
you're saying they're comparable to lots down the road, but those lots that are comparable down the road have been there forever. We're creating this now. You know what I'm saying? I know you're going after a minor variance, but we're creating something that we might tell a guy down the road he can't have because.
Through you, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Yep, thank you. So when the committee is looking at these proposals, as I've gone through my presentation, I've noted that because it's rural residential, infill lots are permitted and supported by the official plan and also by the PPS. So what you're looking at today is a new lot creation as an infill lot. Is it comparable to the neighboring properties? Yes, it is, in depth and somewhat in frontage, because there is some other lots that are undersized. But it is the committee's decision if this is an appropriate location for a new lot and what are the impacts going to be to any neighboring properties. So that is up for discussion and up to the committee to decide today.
And I just have one more, Mr. Chair.
Sure. Go ahead, Ray.
Nothing was said about the septic system for the other place, or did I miss it? Is that system get checked now too?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So when you have an infill lot, there is no trigger to inspect the retained homes septic system. Only when you're dealing with surplus dwellings in the agricultural sector, there is a trigger to ensure that that house is a habitable house, and that the part of that evaluation is to make sure that it's got a working septic system. when you're dealing with residential designation and you have new lot creation next door in this case, there is no trigger mechanism to ensure that there is a habitable dwelling next door. That doesn't, that part of the policy is not, it's not a policy that triggers it.
Just because it's an infill law, but if it was a straight
is
up
the
severance,
difference.
if it was a straight up severance, that's what's different.
This is a straight up severance on a residential lot, and there is no trigger mechanism to make sure that the existing house has a working septic system on it because it is habitable right now. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Any further questions from anyone on the committee?
Mr. Chair, Percy Dufour.
Go ahead, Percy, please.
Couple of, through you, Mr. Chair, when Corrine spoke about the septic system, when that was, those were addressed through the surplus dwelling, and that's how that got put into place. But that should also be added in what's taking place today, and that's something that the planning department should bring before council and through the process and get that passed as well. And my other question is, down the road on the 8th, before we get to that property, is there an on-open road allowance on that one lot that's still open? Is that an on-open road allowance? Otherwise, are we landlocking that farm? Yeah, you can get off and walk the road, but can you still get off and walk the road? Because they sold those lots too.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I can answer that question.
Go ahead,
So-
please.
Yep, to answer Mr. Dufour's question, this lot is, if Sarah could bring it back up on the screen. I'll show you the extents. Yeah, one more. Okay, right there. So what you're seeing here, zoomed in, is obviously, you know, it is the combined purple and green as you're used to. Okay, that is the lot of record. I do not have a zoomed out picture of this, but the property to the rear, that farm lot property, it does have two different accesses. Okay, there's actually several lots in this zone, this area here, okay, behind them. And there's two farm accesses to this property, and they both come off of County Road 8. And then Mr. Dufour is correct that there is yet another field behind the other set of houses around from Walker Road. That is another field, it's separate, and it does have access off of Walker Road. Okay, so it does not affect any corridor or anything, any access to the farm fields behind. Okay.
Right, thank you.
All right. Are you satisfied with that, Percy?
Yes, Mr. Chair, that's fine, thanks.
Yep, great, thank you. Any further questions from the committee? All right, I'm looking for a motion with regards to this application. Sherry,
I'll
you're,
make a motion for acceptance, subject to the recommended conditions.
thank you. Seconder for this motion.
Chair, Percy Dufour had his hand up.
Thank you, Percy.
Yes, I'll second it. Just for clarification, a question, Sherry, that included the conditions that were listed as well?
Yes, I did mention that that was subject to the recommended conditions.
Thank you.
All right, all in favor of the motion as presented?
Both Percy and Ray raised their hand.
Great, thank you. All right, so that was the consent one. Are we going to deal with the minor variance now, Corinne?
That is correct, Mr. Chair. You do need a motion to for the minor variance application next.
Okay. Move
Um,
by,
Sorry, Mr. Chair. Ray Beneteau did raise his hand.
sure, go ahead, Ray, please.
I move the motion for the minor variance.
Wonderful, thank you. Seconder, Sherry? All in favor of the motion as presented?
Ray and Percy have raised their hand.
Great, thank you. Okay, Mr. Robertson, you were very successful in your application today. Thanks for attending.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much. Well, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Great, take care. All right, we'll move on to the next application, which is consent B0322, and Mr. Peter will be here. We'll ask for Corinne for her description of the application.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the next application deals with the property address 2660 County Road 20, and that's in Colchester South Ward 3. And the OP designation for this property, you'll notice some similarities here. It's rural residential. And the zoning category for this property, again, residential R1.3. And the subject lands, they are 1.15 acres in size. That's 167 feet by 300 feet. So it's a rather large size residential lot in rural residential designation. You'll notice here that the severed property is shown here in purple. That property is 100 feet by 300 feet. The retained property, the green part, is 67 feet by 300 feet. So access to the property, County Road 20, in front there, and the retained lot, you'll see from the air photo, does contain one single family dwelling and one small accessory structure behind. The existing dwelling is in good habitable condition. It has a municipal water connection and has a private septic system currently. Next slide, please. Just from the street view, you can see the property here. You can see the neighboring properties at the top on the left-hand side. And you can see the existing dwelling is the beige two-story that's located there. Thank you very much, Sarah. If the committee grants approval of this application, a new access would need to be created for that retained house. So where the applicants have drawn up the dividing property line, that access that you see there in the picture would go to the new lot. Okay, so a new access would need to be for the second story there, the beige house. That is not an issue because, as you can see here, there is no municipal drain or anything that would be a barrier to be putting in another access point there. Okay, next slide, please. So when considering a consent application, again, the committee should ensure that the policies of PPS, the official plan, and the zoning bylaw are satisfied. Upon our review of the PPS, we did not find any conflicts. Again, this meets the criteria for severance in those rural designated lands. When we reviewed the official plan, it also stated that severance for infill lots are encouraged within residential designation if they meet the zoning provisions, the general zoning provisions. And number three, as we noted here, that the property, the retained property, will be slightly a little bit small. Very similar to the last application. They are proposing it to be 67 for frontage, so 67 feet wide for the retained, and that is why we need a zoning bylaw relief, a minor variance for this application for consent. Next slide, please. So here it is, reduction of the minimum lot width provision for R1.3. Again, it should be 98.4 feet. But what we are proposing, or the applicants are proposing, is 67 feet for the retained. The severance, the severed parcel will meet the zoning requirements. It'll be 100 by 300. So it's a large lot. It's got a lot of depth to it. Lots of area for a building envelope plus a septic envelope on these lots. Next slide, please. So when considering a minor variance application, let's run through the 4 tests. So does it satisfy the OP and the zoning bylaw? As I've noted, yes, the OP does support those infill lots. in those residential designations. And there will be ample room for services on these lots for private septic systems, as well as hook up to municipal water. As I noted, there will be a new access that will be required there for the retained parcel. In the picture that you can see at the bottom, and this is what we're looking for, is a characteristic with the neighborhood. And you can see that there is a lot of different sizes and depths. But what we're looking for right here is there any comparison with any more narrow lots? And if you see those black rectangle areas that I've shown there, you may not be able to read them, but those give you an example of some of the more narrow lots. And there was one that was, I believe 78 was one of them. And 67 was the other one. That was just down the street by the corner. Yep, thank you very much. So we have some comparable lots in this area and down the street and also across the street that have some more narrow lots to be compared with. The last one, number 4, this application deals with circumstances particular to the site. The owners wish to sever this lot, but that variance is needed. And as I noted, that existing home, like the last application, it does sit way over to one side. So it does provide ample room for a septic envelope and then also the building envelope. Next slide, please. Should the committee choose to approve these applications, approval would be based on satisfying the following typical conditions here. You can see one thing to notice is anytime that you are creating a new residential lot, they would need the applicable parkland dedication fee applied, and then obviously the listing here. Upon circulation of these applications, we did not receive any objections to these applications from internal departments or external agencies, and we did not receive any inquiries or comments from the public regarding these applications. So at this point, it's back over to you, Mr. Chair, for discussion, and Mr. Menu Peter and Ms. Simi Memchan are joining us today. Thank you. Mr. Chair, I believe you might be on mute there.
Sorry, Mr. Peter, do you have some comments you would like to add?
Mr. Chair, I am asking Mr. Peter to unmute at this time.
Thank you. There we go. Hello, Mr. Peter.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
We can hear you, Mr. Peter. The chair did ask if you had any further questions at this time or any further comments at this time with regards to your application.
I'm happy the way what you said. I was listening you.
Thank you. Open it up to the committee for any questions they may have with regards to this.
Mr. Chair, Percy Dufour.
Go ahead, Percy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To the applicant, what is the plan for that vacant lot? What type of structure do you plan on constructing on it?
Actually, I'm planning to build another house.
What kind of house? Is it a duplex?
That I haven't, but I haven't decided like that. Just for me and family to move over to the county, we need a house. But depending the situation, if allows, maybe a duplex. Because.
Okay, thanks. That answers one question, and I believe that this will also need a bridge or an entrance for that severed property as well.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any further questions from anybody on the committee?
Mr. Chair, Ray Beneteau.
Go ahead, Ray.
Again, septic systems aren't in there. That's got to be a condition on these These are still old houses that we're letting do this. My biggest concern is minor variances aren't minor variances anymore. Like, we're talking 30 and 40 feet for minor variances anymore. Like, can that be added as a condition now? Like, there's no trigger here to catch these old systems, and that's the way they used to catch the old systems. Through you.
Through you, Mr. Chair. I would actually like to ask Ms. Jabour if she can elaborate on the reason why it is a trigger for surplus dwellings, but I am not sure if it can be added for the retained parcel to have a condition for septic system review.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Corrine. So the committee can add any conditions they feel is reasonable on a severance decision. The committee must ask themselves, what is the effect of the severance on the existing septic system on the retained lot? In terms of adding conditions with respects to surplus dwelling for septic systems, as Corrine noted earlier, surplus dwellings are supposed to be habitable dwellings. So a septic system is often part of that structure and is necessary in order for someone to live there. So hence why we ask for that specific condition with respects to surplus dwellings. In this case, it's the creation of a new lot. No new dwelling is proposed here at this time. There will be later on, at which time a building permit for a septic system is necessary. Additionally, when it comes to septic systems, especially those that are in failure, that is a responsibility under the building code. So if our chief building official feels it is necessary for that septic system on the retained lot to be upgraded, he has that authority under the building code, and that's where it should lie. So with respects to conditions affecting this severance, it should be noted in terms of adding conditions that it is one reasonable, and that is it's a direct impact of the severance itself.
Thank you, Rita. Ray, is that good with you, or?
No, really not, because like I say, you're telling me that if I come in and want to sever a surplus dwelling, I have to get it checked. But I don't need one here, and you're still creating a new lot here too.
For you, Mr. Chair, with a surplus dwelling lot, you're creating a lot with an existing house that needs to be habitable. And as I mentioned earlier, part of it being habitable means that they have to have a properly functioning sewage system. So on a surplus dwelling lot, the house is already there. In this case, there is no home. There's going to be a brand new septic system when they do apply for a new permit. If there are concerns with the septic system on the retained lot, that would have been picked up during a pre-consultation. The building department reviews these applications, and it is a matter under the building code. And in our opinion, it is not reasonable to add this condition to the severance.
Okay, Ray, further comment? Okay. Sherry, do you have any questions or comments? I've got a question myself, and it's with regards to the plan of survey with respect to this property. And it appears, so if you could go to Mr. Setterington's plan, it appears that this lot is actually only 132 feet wide. So is that realistic? Because we're looking at, it appears to be at 412,857 on that, and both the road and the back lot are at 132 feet.
Mr. Chair, I'm just trying to pull up the survey at this time. So just bear with
Thank
me,
you.
please. 6.4. Yeah. It's right here, isn't it?
Yeah, you won't be able to read it once you scroll in. I'm gonna try and get it. You gotta actually go into the.
Okay. Just one moment.
To see if we can actually zoom in.
It's the same, but.
I want to make sure he's looking at the rate.
Mr. Chair, is this correct? Is this the survey you're talking about?
Yes.
That's part one.
It's
And
part
if you
B.
look on the bottom corner there, I'm sorry.
So, yeah, it's part one.
Part one.
Yeah. And then go to your left, Sarah, right, go up a little bit more, right there. It's right in the middle. Sorry. Right here. So I'm seeing 167.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was looking at the survey that was a part of our package and I didn't see this particular piece on it.
This is the original package.
Yeah, so the lot that I, okay. Part one. I see where you're at now. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. You're very welcome, Mr. Chair.
All right, any further questions from any members of the committee? Can we have a motion with regards to this consent application?
Mr. Dufour, Chair?
Go ahead, Percy.
I'll move that we grant the applications with all the conditions that Corinne read off. Also, make sure that the new access is added into the conditions, that it has to be fulfilled within 2 years. That'll be my motion.
Okay, is there a seconder for Percy's motion? Sherry?
Mr. Chair, Ray Beneteau?
Oh, okay. Thank you, Ray. All in favor of the motion as presented?
Ray and Percy have raised their hand.
Good, and Sherry too. Thank you, everyone. Okay, Mr. Peter, your application has been accepted for your consent. Now we'll move on to the minor variance. Are there any comments from anybody? Corinne, do you have a comment on this?
No comment, Mr. Chair. I believe Mr. Bennett would like to make a motion. I'll make a motion. Make a motion for approval.
All right, thank you, Ray. Seconder for the motion?
Mr. Chair,
I will second it.
Thank you, Percy. All in favor of the motion as presented?
Mr. Dufour and Beneto's hands are raised.
Thank you. Sherry too. Thank you very much. I'm sorry, Corinne, just for a minute, can you see Sherry's picture on your screen?
We can, Mr. Chair.
Oh, okay, thank you. All right, we'll move on to the next one, which is a consent application by Mr. Colavino for industrial land on Roseboro Road.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. So we're looking at B0422 and B0522. I am going to present them together because they are a little bit more streamlined. And I do notice that somebody does not have their mic muted. I'm not quite sure who that is, but if you could just check to make sure that you're muted, that would be great. Thanks, Sarah. Okay, so next on the docket here is what you're seeing on the screen is the Colavino Industrial Park, and it is located just off of Roseboro Road in Harrow, and that is Ward 4. And the OP designation for these lands is industrial, and the zoning category for the property is manufacturing M2.1. And just for the committee's information, the official plan designation, the property is split actually. There's two designations on the property. So I just want Sarah to just identify the narrow skinnier part of the green section on the left-hand side, Sarah. Yeah. So you can see it's shaped like an L. And I just wanted to note for the committee's information that the skinnier part of the farmland back there, that is agricultural, but the larger area where the purple and the green, yeah, that is all, that is zoned for industrial, where the purple areas are. Okay, so that area, when I speak to the official plan designation, is the industrial lands and then also the manufacturing lands. Okay, so the rest of the area is agricultural. So moving on, the whole total subject lot, both purple and green together, 75 acres approximately. The severed area, let's call it lot A, that's the top purple parcel, that's 7.6 acres. And the bottom purple section there, that is 9.6 acres. And the retained lands, the green, will eventually be 58.66 acres in size. Now, Loricon Crescent is the industrial park's access roadway, and that is actually assumed by the town of Essex. So it is a town of Essex roadway. And according to the official plan policies, any future development on these lands would be subject to site plan control. Next slide, please. As I'm presenting both these applications together, you'll notice a left and a right here for each severance application, and you will see severance A on the left, and you'll notice that shown up on the top corner there. And then once you apply the next severance, you'll notice that the yellow area, the retained, has gotten smaller, but one particular area I wanted to show you was the access. So after those two severances are severed off, you'll notice that there's a little bit of a yellow area that sticks out from the cul-de-sac. That is for a future roadway potentially, but that is also the access back to those lands. One other item to tell the committee today, just for clarification, is that those farmlands that are on the latter half of the side of the property, that's the western side, the Colavino properties, they do own another adjacent farm lot, okay, next to these lands on the west side. That is how they get the farm equipment in. They farm this property, the latter half of this property, plus the adjacent farm field. And that's how they actually get their farm equipment in. They don't actually drive down the Loricon Crescent in order to do the farming that's there. Okay, so I just wanted to clarify. But the end of that cul-de-sac is for the legal access. Okay, that will provide the legal access to these the retained lands, but they do access it actually for the farm equipment from the other side. Okay, so moving on from here, next slide, please. Let's take a picture, or let's take a look at the property and how it looks today. So these areas here, the top left-hand corner, that's Severance B. So that's just off the cul-de-sac. The Severance B would access from the end of the cul-de-sac existing today, so they would have access. The middle top is that access corridor. Okay, and there is actually a stormwater pond there for the roadway that is just off to the side. Okay, so access on one side and then the retaining pond in the middle property. Sarah, that's perfect. Yeah. Now the one at the other side, top right, that is Severance A. Okay, so you can see where it's at. And again, they would access it from the end of the cul-de-sac. A couple more pictures there right in the insets. We've got Select Tool, and then we also have the just the showing of the Colavino Business Park. And then at the bottom, again, just another couple shots of the stormwater pond plus the access, and then also Loricon itself. So Loricon itself has all municipal services to it. All connections are available for these two lots. Next slide, please. These diagrams were added to your package just to show you a little bit of the detail about how you would access the retained lands. And then also it shows the stormwater pond. So there is a corridor there to get through. And then lastly, next slide, please. So when we assess these applications, we need to make sure that we are satisfying the provincial policy statement, the official plan, and the zoning bylaw. Through the PPS, we did not find any conflicts. The PPS does promote employment in industrial land uses in settlement areas and areas away from sensitive uses such as residential. And this is, as you know, in a pocket adjacent to in agricultural lands, pardon me. These lots are within the existing Colavino Industrial Park, so they've already been zoned accordingly and also designated accordingly. The official plan states that severances and industrial designations are encouraged, provided that the zoning provisions can be met. Future development will be subject to satisfying site plan control as another note there. And further, the zoning bylaw, these lots are zoned appropriately for manufacturing N2.1, and they satisfy the zoning provisions for minimum lot width, the lot area, layouts demonstrate an orderly development pattern as well. And lastly, I noted that the municipal services are already and available there. Next slide, please. So should the committee choose to approve these applications, it's staff recommendation to include the following conditions. They are the typical conditions, and the only one that stands out is the parkland dedication, just a slightly difference from the residential parkland dedication. It's a fee payment, 2% of the appraised value of the settled lots. And then all conditions need to be fulfilled by 2 years from this date. On circulation to the public, we did not receive any inquiries or objections to the application. And ERCA provided comments that they had no objections. However, any works within the vicinity of the Richmond Drain will require approval, and they also request to review any stormwater reports for future development. We did not receive any objections from internal departments or other agencies with regards to this application. So at this point, I will hand it back over to you, Mr. Chair. I believe Mr. Michael Colavino is joining us to speak also on this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Corinne. Mr. Colavino, is there anything you'd like to add to her description?
No, sir. Thank you guys for considering my application, and I'm available for any questions or comments you may have. And just would really like to thank Corinne for all her help with this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from committee members for Mr. Colavino?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Dufour.
Go ahead, Percy, please.
Mr. Chair, I got a question for Mr. Colavino. The ditch that runs in between the properties, I looked on a drainage map, that's not a drain, municipal drain, I don't believe, is it?
Sorry, I was having a difficult time hearing you there. Could you repeat the question?
The ditch that runs between the two properties is not a municipal drain, is it? Is it just a private ditch?
That is a stormwater management pond that we were required to put in when developing the road there.
So when you have access to both those properties, are you going to have a roadway on both sides of that drainage? On both sides of the drainage, yes?
The access will be on both sides of the drainage, but they have access before the drain. They can access it around the cul-de-sac, or I believe even before the cul-de-sac starts.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chair, I have one more question for
Sure.
either Corinne or Rita. And it permits a chemical plant there. Is there any thoughts of that going to take place, and what kind of chemicals are they allowed to build and service on that area?
Mr. Chair, I can jump in there. So through you, the N2.1 zoning bylaw, and this sometimes can get a little bit confusing. The way that the zoning bylaw is written, it lists a several number of items that are permitted, but then it also states in that zoning bylaw, it says all of these industrial uses can be done, but then it says except. So the little word except is located at the top of the zoning bylaw list, and it says except, and then it states all of the heavy industrial uses. And the M2.1, because it states except, these items, which in that list is like chemical plant, heavy industrial, that means that those are not permitted. So M 2.1, it should state in the M 2.1 that it is actually not permitted. So I'm not sure, I'm gonna ask for Sarah to maybe bring this up for me, if she can find it in a second here. Hang on, if everybody can just pause for a moment.
What excludes your rate?
Yeah, so, okay, so are you there? Oh, that's great. Okay, so if you guys are gonna see this in a second. Because this is good, this is a good question for everybody to see. Okay, so here's the M 2.1. And then what you have on the left-hand side is, on the left side, yep, you'll have your like typical, you know, different industrial uses per se, these items. And then it says at the top of the next column, it says any industrial use. So that's a big category. And then it says except. And then when you look through this list, you know, those are very intensive industrial, and that's where it's stating, no, these are actually not specifically allowed. Everything from a smelting plant to a blast furnace to, you know, coke oven and everything listing in between here. So, you know, that's just a good little example of how to look at this and read it. And I think when I first came to Essex, I missed that one too. And I was like, okay, that's everything industrial use except these items. So hopefully that clarifies it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Corinne.
Thank you, Percy. Any further questions? So, Mr. Colavino, it would appear to me that if the roadway is going to be extended to allow access to those back lots, that you're going to be going right over that retention pond?
Yes, that is correct, but the retention pond would have to be moved at that time.
Oh, okay. All right, I guess we'll deal with that when the time comes on that. And just to you, Corinne, when there are adjacent farmlands and you said that the access to the agricultural part of the back is through an adjacent farmland that's owned by the Colavinos, do they not become linked as one?
Through you, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
So, when you have a situation where two parcels are owned by the same owner, if they are registered the same way at the registrar's office, sometimes they can merge. If the Colavinos own both properties, but they have them registered slightly different, say if there's a numbered company on one of them and a different numbered company on the next adjacent property, then they won't merge. But what they're doing right now is they're accessing, you know, they're plowing the whole entire field at both those parcels as if they were together per se. So I hope that answers that question, but then also your other question with regards to if there was future development proposed behind these two lots that are proposed to be created, and there would be an extension of the public right-of-way back to those lands. When Mr. Colavino stated that, you know, that would have to go through a development process at that time. So currently, the designation does not permit additional industrial lands back there. Could it in the future, potentially, if we cross that bridge, then we will look at development proposals. The stormwater pond would have to be appropriately relocated onto another area of the retained lands. So it would not affect these two lots in any way. They would be relocated. The stormwater pond is only for the stormwater runoff from the road and potentially an outlet for any stormwater management facilities on individual properties. But the situation that we have in front of us, the creation of these two lots, can be accommodated today for stormwater management and drainage through the development process. Okay, so when these two lots are sold, each one of them will go through the site plan control process, and they will have to submit stormwater management studies and so forth and everything, and they'll have to get their proper approvals that way. Today, we were only looking at, can these 2 lots be created, and do they satisfy the requirements that we've gone through in the presentation?
Okay. So there's no concern that we're creating a landlocked agricultural lot back there then?
Through you, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
In the diagram that we showed on the screen, what we are creating is 2 new industrial lots, and then the retained will have that access, that strip of land that I showed you off of the end of the cul-de-sac.
Yeah.
That is the area that is for access to that property. That's the legal access. Okay. Can it fit a combine? Probably not. You probably don't want to drive the combine through the Loricon Crescent. They will be accessing it from the back. So it's technically not landlocked.
Okay.
There is a legal access there. Mr. Colavino has also provided the surveys to show the width of the access there. And that's in those the surveys that were provided. So there is enough area to get through to the retained property for legal access.
All right, thank you. All right, are there any further comments from anybody? Looking for a motion with regards to the consent application.
Mr. Chair, Ray Beneteau makes a motion.
I'll move the applications, you move them. I'll move both of them.
You gotta move them individually. Sorry.
Okay, seconder. Sherry, thank you, Sherry. All in favor?
And Percy has approved as well. His hand was up.
All right, great. Thank you, everyone. So I'm sorry, that was the consent and they were both consents. Thank you, Ray.
Mr. Chair, they were, however, we do need a motion for application BO 622 as well. Or sorry, BO 6, sorry, BO 522.
Yeah. All right.
Mr.
Motion.
Beneteau did make the motion.
Great. The seconder.
Mr. Dufour?
Okay, all in favor?
Okay,
Wonderful,
carried.
thank you. Okay, Mr. Colavino, you were successful on both of your applications. Thank you for attending today.
Thank you for everyone's time. Appreciate it.
Sarah, there's a question at the bottom of the chat there in the meeting, just an FYI.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. The question, I'm not sure if everyone can see, it was just from an anonymous attendee asking if they can leave or stay. I am going to publicly, if your application has been heard, you are more than welcome to leave the meeting. If your application has yet to be heard, we do recommend that you stay.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the last application for today. It's that application BO 622. Corinne, gonna speak with that one, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the last application, BO 622, this is for the creation of a new residential lot. The property location is I just noticed that I think I may have an error in my apologies, everyone. I do have an error on the PowerPoint presentation. What that should state is the property is 87 and 89 Draper Street. And it should state Colchester, and that should state Ward 3. So I had that mistake in the agenda, and I also see that I have that mistake in the PowerPoint presentation. Again, my apologies, 87 and 89 Draper Street. And the official plan designation for this property is R1, it's R2.1 actually, so it's not rural residential. It is residential R2.1. So the R2.1 zoning category actually allows duplexes. It actually allows semi-detached. So it has a higher density than the regular R1.1 zone. So this little pocket of Colchester, from here over to the corner of Dunn Street, those areas here have been designated in the official plan residential, and then they've also received a zoning category of R2.1, so it does permit a little bit of a higher density. So what we have here is on the air photo, you'll see that there is an existing structure. That's a semi-detached structure. It received approval some time ago, and now the applicant, Mr. Alex Pateo, wants to sever these lots into two freehold lots. So this unit that has a semi-detached on it, he wants to simply sever it down the middle line, the middle common wall, and create two freehold structures, okay? Two freehold lots. We have seen this before. This is a proposal that the official plan does support for severances. So this would be like an infill lot. But we do allow this for semi-detached proposals. Okay, next slide, please. So here's just a view of the existing property, and you can see here that it is a semi-detached. This property also has two second dwelling units. Can think of the word there for a second, sorry. Second dwelling units are located in the downstairs of this semi-detached. So you can see them back there at the back of the property. They have access to those areas there, and that from the front of the property, the new property line would simply go straight through the existing structure. Next slide, please. Okay, so when reviewing consent applications, you have to ensure that you're following the policies of the provincial policy statement, the official plan, and zoning bylaws. So let's go through those. We did not find any conflicts with the provincial policy statement because it does meet the criteria for a residential infill severance. The official plan does encourage these types of infilling proposals. They also encourage intensification in the areas within the settlement areas, in those built up areas. And they also ask for a variation or a variety of housing types. So this does allow semi-detached to be severed into freehold lots in these pockets of the R2.1 zoning category. And lastly, the zoning bylaw, this proposal does meet all of the provisions for the zoning bylaw for the R2.1. So that includes your setbacks, that includes your lot coverage, and that also includes the fact that they did put a second dwelling unit in the lower units, and that is also permitted by the bylaw. Next slide, please. So should the committee choose to approve these applications, it is staff's recommendation to include the following conditions, and one note there, the one in red, which also includes that if you create a new lot as an infill, you do have to ensure that the parkland dedication fee is applied. So upon circulation to the public, we did not receive any inquiries or objections to this application. IRCA did provide comments and they had no objections, and we did not receive any further or any objections from internal departments or external agencies. At this point, I will turn it back over to you, Mr. Chair. I believe Mr. Alex Pateo is joining us to speak on this item. Thank you.
Yes, hello.
Mr. Pateo, do you have anything you'd like to add at this time?
No, I believe Corinne was clear and decisive about the matter, and I think she covered all the topics.
Okay, thank you. Committee, are there any questions from anyone on the committee with regards to this?
Chair, Mr. Beneteau.
Sure, go ahead, Ray.
You, Mr. Chair, this is no different than the ones right here in town that they've come and done things to.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we have seen similar proposals in the last year with regards to this. I believe 80 Weird was one of them, and this is supported by the official plan and zoning bylaw. criteria. So yes, Mr. Beneteau, it is very similar to the ones that we've just seen. Thanks.
I'm good with it, Mr. Chair. I'm ready to make a motion if you're ready.
Thank you. Further
Mr.
questions,
Chair.
from the committee?
Percy Dufour.
Go ahead, Percy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To Mr. Mateo, when you built that dwelling, did you have in mind to move forward with separating it?
Yes, that was always my intention.
And was the building inspector aware of it at that time, that that was going to take place?
I can't recall. It was approximately 3 years ago now.
So is there a firewall between those two buildings?
That's correct, yes.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions? So, Mr. Pateo, it was originally constructed with a second dwelling unit in the basement. That was a part of the official plan too.
No, that was not a part of the official plan. It is a second dwelling, for example, a mother-in-law suite in the basement.
Okay. Thank you. So we're ending up with, Corinne, directed to you, I guess. We're ending up with fairly dense as far as people go on what would normally be considered an undersized lot. Is that correct?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So when we have properties that are zoned for R2.1, the R2.1 is a zone that does permit that higher density. Okay, so it is the objective, okay, to have semi-detached properties. So this total size property, it does meet the minimum requirements. The subject property is 60 by 160, so it's actually larger than the average. So this property, because semi-detached are permitted by the town of Essex to be severed on that common wall in 2 freehold units, the lot itself is not undersized. Okay, it does meet the zoning bylaws for the correct size. And then further, it is permitted to be able to do a severance in those, in the R2.1 zone, or a semi-detached be into 2 freehold units. Now, to your question about, are we concerned about the density in this area? As I mentioned, this part of Colchester, that corner, the whole corner over to Dunn, that was purposely zoned to have a pocket of like mixed use or mixed density, I should say. So that pocket, this is part of it. Okay, so it's part of the R2.1. Yes, there is other areas around it that are R1.1, so it's a lower density. But this area, this is the objective of the town of Essex official plan and the zoning bylaw, to have this corner with a higher density with these semi-detached, potentially townhouses. It's designed for that. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. So is there some adjustment? I couldn't really determine from the drawings that were presented on side lot clearance and that type of situation. Does it meet all those things on both sides of it too then?
Yeah, great question through you, Mr. Chair. The analysis of the zoning bylaw, it does comply with the zoning bylaw. So your setbacks from the side yards, yes, it does. I believe they have, and I might be able to, I'm not sure if I can zoom in now, but they have at least 4 feet on either side. So that meets the zoning bylaw. And then also for your parking, for your lot coverage. Thanks, Sarah. That's perfect. Actually, it's over on the left-hand side. If you look at the survey on the right-hand side.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. I don't know if you can zoom in.
This one.
I just use these for examples when I'm talking, so you know which one I'm referring to in your plans. If you move over to the right more,
You want this one?
Yeah.
Oh,
that's the
okay.
one.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, so if you were to zoom into here, you'll be able to see that when this was built 3 years ago, as Mr. Pateo stated, he had to meet all of the requirements in the zoning bylaw, so he did not have to get a minor variance at that time to go closer to the lot lines, so he met those requirements. And then also, the zoning bylaw states that for a semi-detached, you can have 0 setback from a lot line because it's a common shared wall for a semi-detached. So the
Sure.
zoning bylaw does accommodate that. Okay, so that would be 0 setback distance. So the answer is yes.
Okay. And Corinne, further to that, are those the only properties in the village that are listed as an R 2.1?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. So the whole corner from this property onwards to Dunn Road, and then a couple properties just south, those are all R 2.1. So we will see maybe in the future more semi-detached around that corner. There is, I believe, a couple more pockets in the Colchester hamlet that do have the R 2.1. Unfortunately, I will not be able to point those out, but there is a couple pockets. So we do have some mixed density allocated for the Colchester hamlet.
So if someone has a lot in Colchester, can they apply to have an R 2.1 designation on it?
Through you, Mr. Chair, what they would have to do is they'd have to, if they have an R 1.1 zoning, which allows for single family dwellings,
Sure.
what they would have to do is come to the planning department to have a pre-consultation for a zoning bylaw amendment. And what they would have to do is ask for special site-specific zoning to allow for a semi-detached, for instance. So they would have to go through a zoning amendment.
Okay, thank you. All right, any questions from anyone on the committee? Can I have a motion with regards to this application?
Chair, Mr. Beneteau?
I'll move the application.
Thank you, Ray. Is there a seconder? Sherry? All in favor of the application? Or the motion, I guess, I'm sorry.
So just a quick comment, Mr. Chair.
Sure, go ahead, Percy.
That structure definitely isn't compatible for the area. And yeah, there's changes that are going to allow those to happen. Otherwise, I would not have supported this application. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Percy. Okay, so I'm sorry, with the vote on the motion then?
We did not. So Mr. Beneteau moved and Ms. DeCedar did second it. However, we have not carried it as of yet.
All right, we have a vote on the motion as presented. All in favor?
Mr. Dufour does not have his hand up.
Thank you. So is that enough for it to carry then?
Mr. Chair, we would need you to determine the vote, right? No, we do have enough. Sorry, I apologize. Mr. Beneteau and Ms. DeCedar, we are fine. It is carried.
No, it's not.
Okay,
It's not?
No, Brian has to vote. If he votes opposed to it, it's time.
Okay.
And it's the last motion.
Mr. Gray, how do you vote? Do you vote opposed or for this application?
I unfortunately, through the explanations, I will have to vote in favor.
In favor? Okay, then it is carried. And I will note that Mr. Dufour has opposed the application.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. So that's the applications that were presented tonight. But Mr. Pateo, your application was approved.
Great, and thank you, everybody. Thank you, Corinne, and everybody for your time.
All right, so we'll move on. Was there any correspondence that should be noted with regards to today's meeting?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Is there any new business that anyone would like to bring up at this time? Can we have a motion for adjournment then, please?
Chair, Mr. Beneteau,
Thank you, Ray. Seconder.
Mr. Dufour,
Thank you. All in favor?
carried.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good night. And I again want to apologize for the technical difficulties, but do also want to thank everybody for having the patience with us this evening. So we will see everybody April 20th.